So today was day 8 of the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial, and once again, we saw more fireworks in the courtroom. We finished Johnny Depp's cross-examination, finally, then got through his redirect until we got to meet Ben King, Johnny Depp's house manager and personal assistant. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome to Legalbytes. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we explain the law one bite at a time. So we finally finished Johnny Depp's testimony today after last week when we left off his cross-examination with some really bad audio that sounded like he was going to try to take his life, and Amber was maybe trying to convince him not to, but also saying she'll give him a sharper knife. Anyway, it was pretty troubling to listen to, and Johnny had definitely been visibly shaken up listening to it on the stand in front of the whole world. And because he was technically still testifying when Judge Ascarati closed out trial for the weekend, he wasn't able to talk to his attorneys throughout that entire time period. Looking at his performance today, I personally think that the whole experience rattled him, and I suspect that he may have been dwelling on those moments from that audio recording for at least some of the weekend, if not the whole weekend. And when he arrived this morning to continue his cross-examination, he seemed to be back to a similar headspace that he was in on Wednesday, when I was concerned about him getting maybe a little bit too snarky with Mr. Rottenborn leading his cross-examination. Now, to be clear, it's Rottenborn's job to poke and prod at Johnny to try to get a reaction out of him. So although it might feel dirty from a certain perspective, this is just what Rottenborn needs to do his job properly to represent his client. Now, today's cross-examination was a lot more of the same from Thursday, with Rottenborn jumping around between 2013 and 2016 with texts and emails that honestly largely seemed the same as what we saw last week. However, there were two main differences. First, today we heard some very short audio clips that sounded pretty damning, including Johnny yelling at the top of his lungs at Amber, another of Johnny saying something along the lines of, "It's going to be a bloodbath like it was on the island," and more. Rottenborn would play the audio clips without asking Johnny any questions, preventing him from elaborating or contextualizing the clips. Although this might be frustrating to supporters of Johnny Depp, this is entirely proper. Personally, I felt like I could feel Johnny's anxiety setting in as he started to get more combative with Rottenborn through the process. And he even drew a comment from Judge Ascarati at one point to essentially cut it out. This comment was in front of the jury, and it's never something that you want to see happen, although it was basically a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. Now, that said, other than his quips and his barbs, at no point did Johnny ever do anything like lose it on the stand. One of the greatest concerns with Johnny's testimony was that he could potentially be poked and prodded into an outburst, and that didn't happen, which is good consistency for his case. But then moving on, at the end of the cross-examination, Rottenborn effectively whipped his questions back up to the ones that he basically started his cross-examination with. What are Johnny's claims aimed at, and what time period really matters? Specifically, Rottenborn was pushing an argument that Johnny's claim comes out of a 2018 Washington Post article and that nothing else before that really matters. The 2016 domestic violence restraining order and the fallout that Johnny experienced as a result before the article came out are all before the 2018 article and therefore are irrelevant, according to Rottenborn. However, on Rottenborn's way to a dramatic ending of the cross-examination, Johnny's attorney was able to successfully object to a number of Rottenborn's questions, tripping him up and ultimately preventing him from asking some very tough but improper questions. This had all the feel of cutting Rottenborn's legs out from under him, so to speak. But anyway, that was the cross-examination, and we can all celebrate with a large mega pint for getting through that because that took forever. In my opinion, way longer than it needed to be, even with a witness that's as important to this case as Johnny Depp. Up next, we saw Johnny on redirect. Overall, his attorney did a good job of coming back to many of the texts and emails that were brought up on cross-examination, particularly some of the ones that stung the most. And although he seemed noticeably rattled throughout his redirect, Johnny was able to get through it. For example, she gave Johnny an opportunity to address the Paul Bettany texts, where they talk about burning her and drowning her and essentially defiling her corpse. Johnny reiterated the kind of colorful language that he likes to use to convey his emotions, and he explained that these in particular are almost direct quotes from Monty Python, particularly a sketch about a burning witch. If you're familiar with Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you'll recognize the scene that he's talking about. So that to me at least seems reasonable and an expected explanation. They also discussed a text where he seemingly bragged about drinking 1,000 vodkas and Red Bulls. There, he explained that he was essentially hyperbolizing, noting that if he actually drank that much, he would probably be hospitalized or even just dead. As for other messages, he expanded upon a series of emails that he sent to Stephen Duders, saying that Stephen was the quote unquote worrisome type and that Johnny would send him outrageous messages to try to get a rise out of him. Again, reasonable. Not all of his explanations were great, however, as he came across as overselling some parts of his testimony a little bit. For example, there was a text exchange between Johnny and Amber that came up where he told her that there was a book he came across titled Disco Bloodbath. Her response was something like, "Is that what happened on Friday night?" And he replied with something along the lines of, "How do you make me smile?" referencing such a terrible event. On redirect, Johnny explained that he was in a bookstore when he came across the book and thought it was funny, like some kind of a bad slasher movie. Honestly, hearing the title Disco Bloodbath, I'm right there with him. But the problem was that after explaining that the text exchange wasn't them butting heads, but rather engaging in a lighthearted exchange, he was asked about what had happened the previous Friday night. And if my notes and memory are correct, he said something along the lines of, "We may have seen a movie that night." I'm not sure if maybe he was having a memory lapse in the moment, but it did seem like there was more of a negative history in that event than he was leading on. It seemed like it would have been a perfectly acceptable answer if he had just said something like, "We got into an argument and I regretted some of the things that I said." Of course, I'm speculating here because I have no idea what happened that day, but the nonchalance that he gave it just didn't seem to fit this case. And what's more, if he had tied the phrase disco bloodbath to a mere argument, it would have shown that he has a habit of using this specific term in hyperbole, which in the end could minimize much of the sting of a lot of the other messages that use similarly colorful language. Another example of an explanation that didn't quite feel like it fit was his explanation of the definition of the term the monster, which on cross exam we found out Johnny has used on his own quite a few times to describe something within himself. Basically, you could get to where he was indicating while explaining on redirect, but it seemed like he had a hard time putting his finger directly on a succinct definition of what the monster meant. What he needed to show was that the monster was not him becoming an aggressive, violent beast that harms other people. Rather, he needed to show that the monster represented the things that he personally struggled with, namely something like drugs and alcohol, which came out and took control of his life from time to time. He said on the stand that the monster is where he's failed and where he would drink and be disappointed in himself. In my opinion, he almost got there, but I wish that he would have tied it more closely to this sort of entity that harms his insides as opposed to other people. But here's where things went very well, and where I needed to give massive credit to his legal team for planning out their evidence, because this could not have ended on a stronger note for Johnny. At this point of the redirect, his attorney went through the various clips played on cross-examination, and this time played different portions of those clips. Here we got some really damning stuff for Amber. First, we listened to a clip where Amber is complaining about Johnny splitting during fights. This reinforces what Johnny was saying about the fact that he would try to get away, she would follow. In the clip, she essentially says, "You're all but guaranteeing a fight between us by saying I need a few minutes." Then there's another clip where she says, "Couch, couch, couch," multiple times, then complains about his cigarette ashes getting on her or getting flicked at her. Now, it wasn't clear exactly what the whole couch thing was about until Johnny explained in his redirect that she was ordering him to sit on the couch and that he was trying to avoid confrontation, which to me definitely sounded like that once he mentioned it. And as for the cigarettes and the cigarette ashes, he said that some of his ashes may have gotten on her, but that he never actually flicked anything at her. Then there was another audio clip that was played where again they're arguing. In the clip, Amber sounds pretty clearly drunk and at one point gets really loud, screaming and crying. And then by the end of the clip, she's suddenly speaking in an otherwise very soft and soothing tone, telling him to calm down. On an emotional level, she definitely comes off unhinged and really just all over the place. And finally, we got to hear the audio that many people have been waiting for. Many people have been asking for when this audio was going to come out in this trial.
All right, any objection to 357A? All right, 357A in evidence.
It's been going on too long, Albert. And we just gotta stop this. Just gotta stop it.
I don't know how to get my reputation back.
We write a letter together.
That means
Saying that we're gonna take this out of the public eye. Saying that we're gonna try and work this out on our own. Saying that the media has created such a fucking hateful storm that it's sickening, that we love each other, and that we want to make sure each other is okay. Have we had fights in the past? Have we had this or whatever? Fuck it, they already know all that shit. Don't matter. Here's the deal.
no, it matters. It makes. You have no idea. Every ounce of my credibility has been taken from. I mean, and done so in a dishonest way. You know.
Amber, the abuse thing is we've got to deal with that. Yeah, we've got to deal with that,
I don't
Amber.
have any way of my credit. It's my credibility. You know what?
And why did you put that out there?
I did not. You forced me. Your team forced me to by going on the OpEd.
I didn't force you
From
to.
the very beginning. I promise. Look up the timeline to these things. Everything is. Forget it. Forget it. You don't believe what I say. You don't believe what I say. But I did not choose this. Every step of the way has been an OpEd.
I did not put this anywhere. I didn't. Let me talk to the fucking team.
I did not call the cops. I made them so statements.
IO called the
I did not
cops.
call the cops.
You told IO to call the cops.
I did not call the cops, and I did not give them any statement when they came. I've been trying to protect you.
You told IO to call the cops.
When while it was happening?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, because the last time that it got crazy between us, I really did think I was going to lose my life, and I thought you would do it on accident. And I told you that. I said, oh my God, I thought the first time.
Amber, I lost a fucking finger, man. Come on. I had a mineral can, a jar of mineral spirits thrown at my nose.
You can please tell people that it was a fair fight and see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and
Yes.
I know it's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
It doesn't matter if it's fair fight my ass.
Exactly, because you're.
Yeah.
Mr. Depp, when did you have the conversation reflected in this report?
Y'all were holding out on me on these audios.
I told you. That was horribly damning because it showed not just that she essentially admitted to being the abuser in the relationship, but she also hinted at a previous dishonest scheme to paint him as the abuser. Leaving the jury with this clip was exactly what they needed to do and left him in the strongest possible position, even with his imperfect answers during his cross-exam and during his redirect. So That was the end of Johnny Depp's testimony. Next, we got to hear from Ben King, Johnny Depp's house manager and personal assistant. Mr. King testified to some experiences working for Johnny and Amber in London and elsewhere, but the most important part of his testimony was talking about the Australia incident. Particularly, he testified about the details of the awful state that the house was in after the incident and the location in which he found Johnny's fingertip. He described the house in the most detail that we've heard yet. He said there was blood essentially all over the place, going up the stairs, on the wall, on the floor, and on the duvet in the master bedroom. He testified that there were marble stairs missing a chunk, there was a broken ping pong table, broken glass on the floor, and also a piece of marble that was missing from the top of the bar where he eventually found the finger. Essentially, it sounded like there was some sort of a Marvel Avengers brawl that happened here. Anyway, in the same location where he found the finger, Mr. King said he could also see puddles of what smelled like alcohol on the ground all around the bar, as well as smashed bottles of Stolichnaya vodka. This all seems to corroborate pretty well with what Johnny had said as to how he lost the tip of his right middle finger in the incident. Then Mr. King testified that not long after the incident, he accompanied Amber on a flight back to LA without Johnny. Most of the 14-hour flight was spent sleeping, he said. But he also said that towards the end of the flight, he did notice that Amber had some marks on her left forearm that were long, uniform, thin, and evenly spaced. The way he said it seemed to suggest that perhaps those cuts suddenly appeared during the flight, but nurse Debbie Lloyd did previously testify that she saw cuts on Amber's arm while at the house back in Australia. Anyway, then Amber's attorney got up to do the cross-examination of Mr. King, and it honestly just seemed pointless. In my opinion, this was just a waste of Amber's minutes, and they would have done well to just pass the witness and save that time for another, more important witness. Honestly, it would have evoked confidence that Mr. King gave no testimony that was in any way really damaging to Amber, and it would have had no harm for Amber while saving the time that they have been arguably burning through on each cross-examination so far. Essentially, my impression is that they've not really been efficiently using their time, and even though this is a 6-week-long trial, Judge Ascarati has noted that the time is passing and passing quickly. But for some reason, the attorney here went through all the details of the house all over again on cross-examination. He then asked about some of the photos that Mr. King had taken of the ruins. Mr. King took one of the lampshade that Johnny had painted on, as well as the mirrors that had all kinds of writing on them. The attorney then asked Mr. King if he took a photo of the vodka bottles he found. And he seemed a little bit caught off guard when Mr. King responded that he did, in fact, take photos of the smashed vodka bottles. This is because the attorney then spent a lot of time asking about whether he had given those over to Johnny or his legal team, and if not, why not? He seemingly tried to suggest that Mr. King was withholding evidence in the face of requests for evidence, but he basically responded that no one had asked for it. I'm not sure whether I believe that entirely, but it is true that the Heard legal team was fully capable of serving a subpoena on Mr. King personally so that they could get those photos themselves. So the fact that they didn't have them really seems to be a little bit of a kind of a self-own at this moment. Also, there was kind of a funny moment when the attorney asked Mr. King whether he even knew what happened to Johnny's finger. Mr. King responded that Dr. Kipper had told him that he had sustained an injury on it, to which the attorney jumped in to object, hey, hearsay, which was kind of awkward, to be honest, because Judge Ascarati had to remind him that he was the one who, in fact, had asked the question in the first place. It was a funny moment because it's true that as the attorney on the cross-exam, it is up to him to ask the questions, and he can't be surprised when the witness answers it in the way that the witness wants to. So ultimately, that just comes down to how he asks his questions and making sure that his questions are tighter for the future. But also, I want to keep in mind that it's true that lawyers make mistakes as well, and we all go through our flubs from time to time. But hopefully, those mistakes don't end up leading us to feel like we need to object to our own question. Anyway, there was a redirect, but the cross-exam was honestly so ineffective that, in my opinion, I don't really think that I need to go into any amount of detail on the redirect. So that leads us to tomorrow, which is day 9 of this trial. It's been reported that the next witness will be Tara Roberts, who is expected to testify that she actually saw Amber Heard verbally and physically abusing Johnny Depp. So if you want to see that, be sure to join us in our live stream right right on this channel tomorrow. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, or at the very least found this interesting or informative. And if you did, I would love it if you'd hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you haven't done so already, I would love it if you could hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded, and more immediately so you can join us on tomorrow's testimony in day 9 of the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial. See you in the next video.